Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, as always, Steve Hall, and I'm just gonna do a side tangent here. Side tangent. This is also something I say. Someone picked at me the other day. They're like, you don't need to say side before you say tangent because a tangent. And I was like, I don't know why I've always said a side tangent. Anyway, So to tangent, I imagine you haven't listened to it yet, but the podcast I did with Mike, and he was like, when will you not be, as always, Steve Hall?
I did. I was just in the midst of editing that episode here in the morning. Absolutely.
It's just, once you have to find, like any podcast host, I think will be able to relate to this, but we do it with our, like any coach, probably any online coach who does like video or voice check-ins, you get that intro. Like I say, essentially the same intro to every client. And some of my clients have taken the piss out of me for it because they're like, me too. I know how you're going to intro this.
What is it that you are saying? Or is it something that you want to keep secret for the people who are then going to sign up with you?
You know, it's one of those things, like if you ask me, I don't know, like my mobile number, or even actually I can't, like if I have to do the months in a certain, like know the month by the like number, I almost have to go through all the months to get it right in my head, or I have to like read out my entire mobile number to be able to like remember it. And it's the same with my check-ins. I almost have to start a check-in to know what I normally say. Otherwise it's what do I say?
No, I can see that.
I think I just say something like, hi, whoever it is. Thank you for your check-in. Let's go straight into things, or something like that.
No, I can definitely see that. It's kind of like you need that trigger for then to be in the groove, and that takes you from one thing to the next thing and to the next thing. It's very hard to then replicate.
And it was actually kind of upsetting. This is, again, a huge tangent, but me and Charlotte watched this show. It's an awful TV show. I don't recommend it. I actually can't remember the name, which is, funny enough, very similar to the point I'm about to make. But Jimmy Carr hosted it, and it was like, I think it was called I Just Told You. It was basically a quiz show where they do stuff on the show and then they ask questions related to stuff they've literally just talked about on the show. So they might show them like a bunch of clips, and then they're asked like, what was this person wearing in the background? How many people were on a bike? What date did I say here, or did that person say here? And it's just random stuff they pull out. And I was like, this is literally, like, it's giving me anxiety talking about it because it's my, like, hell. I cannot remember shit. Like, I'm just like, it will just go straight through my brain. And, but Charlotte, on the other hand, was like, oh, I won't be great at this. And I know she's great at these sort of things. She could remember, like, every person's name. She was like, and I'd be like, man, I just would get no money on this show.
Yeah.
And it was great doing it with her because sometimes she gets upset and she thinks I'm not listening to her because I can't remember anything. And I'm just like, I am listening. Just some things stick in my brain. Some things, a lot of things go right through it. So it's a little bit upsetting because I'm like, I want to be able to just remember stuff. But some people, it's just effortless to remember like names, dates, these sort of things. Whereas my brain just doesn't work like that at all. I'm sure it works better in other ways. I mean, I'm sure there's something good there. But yeah, I struggle with that sort of stuff. It's just like, it's super fatiguing for me to even try and concentrate and remember. And then it stresses me out hugely to try and like get it.
It's funny because for me, it's the other way around. Katie and I, we are always saying like, I have an elephant brain when it comes to kind of remembering things. Also my awareness when it comes to just like walking around and
that I'm better
things
at.
that are happening. So Katie is sometimes asking me where her mobile phone is. And even though that I haven't picked it up, I sometimes can remember that I walked by it and I saw it just like in the corner of my eye, and I could tell her like it's probably it's there. I don't know what it is. There are things that I just have such an easy time remembering and also picking things up and stuff. And then there are things, I don't know, that really don't get into my head. But I can't really now bring up any kind of examples. But when it comes to remembering things, also finding ways around a city or so, when I've been there once, I can easily get around without any kind of map or so. Don't know what it is.
I have two things to say on that. So when we're like walking around, Charlotte will often say like, did you see that? Or like whatever it is, like, did you see this person walk past? Or like, what's like on our surroundings? I'll be like, no, like, I won't have any idea of what my surroundings, what's going on. But in terms of like knowing where we are and where to go to get back somewhere, I find very easy, where she is like, I feel she's like completely lost in her brain. She's like, I have no idea where we should be going right now, which is interesting because you have both. Like, that's great that you have both. And then
it can sometimes lead to problems though, because there must be something like neurological connections and all that kind of stuff, right? That make people have an easy time picking things up, and also the awareness factor, you know? Whereas for other people, they can't even notice certain things. So just a typical thing that has always been the case, like it has been said, and I don't know whether this is still kind of the case or it has been shown scientifically or anything alike, but that males lack often the awareness of kind of dirt lying around, or when things are just not clean at home,
I love if
for
that's
example,
actually
right?
got science behind it.
I don't know, but maybe I've picked it up at some point, right? But most males lack the awareness that something isn't or could be taken care of maybe in the household. And it's not that they intentionally decide to do that, but it's just that they lack the awareness for it.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's something related to I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but my like just genetic intelligence is part of it. I think this lack of memory, because a lot of intelligence is related to just being able to recall facts and figures and learning things. And I think I wouldn't have said I'm a slow learner, but definitely at school, like I went to learning support, I had a tutor, like any like special help there was given at school. Those are things that I had. But I came out of school with some of the best grades, and I am on paper more intelligent than Charlotte, and Charlotte actually says I'm more intelligent. But I like, if we're watching a TV show, even for example, I will sometimes like I know what's going on, but if someone asked me to explain like the whole plot and the story, I'd be like, oh, you know what, like I need to watch it again. Like I can enjoy it and not need to be able to remember all of that. But it's a struggle. But one of the things I can give an example of. One of the things that took me, I was so frustrated with myself. I just couldn't remember Thanos. For the longest time, I couldn't remember this fucker's name. I could picture him, see all of the gauntlet, everything, all the stones, know exactly what this character was. The name, just I couldn't get the name. So frustrating. But yeah, that was a huge tangent.
Yeah, there must be something then kind of neurologically speaking that some of those neurons aren't really having the easiest time to actually then pick on those, I don't know, parts of your brains where you're then able to remember those kind of things, you know?
Yeah.
That wouldn't really, so when it comes to intelligence and also just rating the intelligence of people, there are so many ways in going about this. They are not kind of always standardized. And also, when it comes to intelligence, there's so many different kind of aspects of intelligence as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because when I've done IQ tests, I don't know if they're the right ones. I spoke about with them with Mike, and I've done free ones, and like I generally actually enjoy them. Like they don't frustrate me. Whereas if I do something like go to a pub quiz, I'm the most useless person to have on your team for a pub quiz, and I hate pub quizzes for this reason. I can't do it because it just stresses me out because I'm like, I just don't know. Like I have no answers for you, and sometimes I randomly get them, and it feels great. So I can see why people enjoy pub quizzes if they can actually answer some of the questions, but I can't answer basically any of them. But that's I guess a big kind of problem people have with school is they just teach you to learn. Like they don't teach you to learn. Sorry, they just teach you to like recall facts and figures,
absolutely.
and that's what exams are. They're not like IQ tests. And like you said, intelligence is multifaceted. So yeah. Anyway, that was.
Yeah. Man, I could go off on a tangent because of the educational system. Because that is one of my biggest pet peeves that I have, that children they are just being taught of being puppets, basically, and being able to then replicate or kind of repeat the things that they've been told.
Yeah.
Right. And it's more about kind of being a good puppet instead of being a critical thinker or learning something for yourself and coming up with ideas yourself. Right. So, yeah.
I think it's like, I think some people think if you read like the Renaissance periodization books, you read the muscle and strength pyramids, you kind of keep up to date with the podcast, you can be an online coach. But there's so many soft skills and other skills, like empathy is like a huge one for coaching, that you need, and just like to learn how to actually be a coach, these sources can't give you that. You can't just plug things into a calculator and be like, you need to dig into that person's lifestyle, get an understanding for that. There's so many things behind the scenes that you don't necessarily know or understand. So I also see why people might look in and be like, well, I've read all these books. What does this person know more than I do? And it's like, well, no, you both know all of that. It's then the experience and the exposure and the soft skills, the empathy, that is something, and like the troubleshooting as a coach, like you troubleshoot so often.
Yes.
So I can see if people are like rigid to the books and they're like, no, you must do this or you must do that. Like it can be really challenging for them. So to kind of relate it back to where we're going, but Pascal, you're sick.
I'm sick, yeah. I predicted the future. I'm not only able to be very aware of my surroundings, but I'm also able of predicting the future of getting sick. And it's so funny though, because I needed to think about that just like 5 weeks ago or so, that we've joked around that I should just time it with my deloads. Here we are. It's my deload now. Well, I basically became sick and then decided to take the deload, which was though in week number 6 now. And it worked out just well. Today is also the first day where I'm starting to feel better again. Much, much better than yesterday. Much better actually. But as you can tell by my voice, still not 100%, and sometimes even the concentration is not there, which also requires me to be a little bit more concentrated now and just speaking English. But an example, I was just at the supermarket here today. There was one reason why I went to the supermarket, because I needed to pick up or wanted to pick up new potatoes, a bag of potatoes. Guess what I forgot to pick up?
Yeah,
potatoes. So I bought everything that I didn't need, except for the potatoes that I needed.
I've done that.
And I then went home, and then I think half an hour later I realized, like when I took a look at MyFitnessPal on what I wanted to eat here for dinner, then I realized, shit, I forgot the potatoes. And something like this hardly ever happens to me. So yeah, sick right now, knocked me off my feet quite severely, but just for a couple of days. And it's just like sickness, just a normal sickness. It's not COVID or anything alike, but more severe this time. But also that was the case for Tony as well. He was actually coughing quite badly overall. And now I'm in the same position, having a hard time just like breathing and all that kind of stuff. When I was stepping on my treadmill doing my morning walks with check-ins, I was sweating. That's how I felt overall. And yeah, hopefully things are then improving until the end of the week, so that I can then start the new mesocycle then.
It's funny because, well, it's not funny, but you deloading when you get sick, people also quite often, and this has happened to me, and I don't know if you've also seen it with some of your clients, where they get sick in their deload. And I don't know if that's related to like the immune system being suppressed because you're training with an overwhelming amount of stress and volume, and so you get an immune system that's suppressed there. But yeah, I see quite a few people get sick in their deload anyway.
It's the worst. The worst is when you're just coming out of the deload, and then, I don't know, 1 or 2 days, and then the sickness actually hits you, where it's like, fucking hell, now I need to take another week of a deload. Often it sounds so awful in the initial moment, but if you really think about it, and this is also something that I'm always trying to communicate with my athletes, you can always think about it this way. If you're planning and doing this for the next 10 years, just think about how many potential weeks you have in front of you. Like, let's just assume 520 weeks now in front of you. If there's kind of 1-2 weeks every year or so, doesn't really matter then. Then you may have spent like 20 weeks in total on being sick out of 520 weeks. It's not that big of a deal. Yeah. And this is always the way that I like to look at things, especially considering that bodybuilding, strength sports, physique sports, it's just a game of patience. And if you're not planning and staying or doing this for a long time, then I can absolutely understand the concerns. But then probably the sport isn't for you anyway to begin with. And if you're then planning and doing this for a long time, it's annoying, but it shouldn't really stress you too much.
I think it's actually really, and I know this was the case for you at one point, it's been a while though, really rare for me to get sick enough to not go to the gym. Like I can't remember the last time. Actually, it might have been like, I think it was COVID was when like the last time I was sick enough not to go to the gym, and that was like I don't know how long ago. That was last year, so it wasn't that long ago. But that was kind of a unique case in a sense because it was COVID. But yeah, I imagine a lot of people get that, and luckily you quite often get that sort of cold that it's like it's not so bad you can't go to the gym, so you can probably eke out a week one. But like you said, if it is bad enough so that, for example, if you're not going to work, you've called in sick to work. Yeah. If you're called into sick to work, you're not going to the gym. Yeah, you shouldn't be going to the gym probably because you're just not going to have a productive workout in that sense. And like you said, like a couple of days extra rest, like it's absolutely not the biggest deal. It's just like if your deload's a week, but then that weekend or something, you have a small trip which extends the deload by another half week. It's like, well, man, that's so not a big deal. The people who that sort of stuff holds them, not necessarily holds them back, but it's the people who get held back by this sort of thing and they use any excuse. Oh, I had 1 hour less sleep, so I thought I'd just not go to the gym today or the next day because, performance is going to be not optimal. It's like, oh, come on. Like, you got to push through some shit now and then.
Especially considering that there will eventually come the time where you have to forcefully take some time away from the gym. So you better want to make sure that you do the things that you need to do when you have the chance to. And if you don't, these are then the people who always end up spinning their wheels or, I don't know, end up then with program hopping or so because they try to find the reason for their, I wouldn't say failure because they are not failing, but they are not making the progress, for their lack of progress in other reasons other than them being consistently ticking off the fundamentally important boxes.
Pascal, this is another slight tangent. This is what I wanted to ask. What's the beverage you've got?
I think you've asked me that once already at some other point. This time it's called Flying Power.
I haven't heard of that one.
No, it's from Aldi, I think. The zero version of their energy drink from Aldi. Flying Power. What do you think about the name? Is it good?
Man, they all just rip off Red Bull, don't they? Like Red Bull gives you wings.
An eagle.
Flying Power. Is it leading you to fly? I quite like it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull was always supposed to make you fly, but
yeah, it was.
All
Red
it
Bull
did
gives you wings.
give you heart attacks or so.
What I wanted to ask, actually, I've seen people posting. I think it's called like Morning Harvest is an Aldi brand of cereal, I think. And there's like Reese's Puffs, Aldi branded. And I'm like, fucking Lidl does not have any of this good cereal. Their cereal generally is pretty rubbish. I want some of this cheap Reese's Puffs.
Yeah, the thing is, though, Steve, that this is completely outside of my scope of... So we've talked about lack of awareness. This is kind of not because of lack of awareness, but because it doesn't really take place in my life at all. Because I'm not as privileged as you, eating 4,000 calories and struggling with gaining weight.
You're not perusing the cereal aisle for the new ones that are coming out. This is just what I do, where I'm like, all right, which of these are going to be tasty and I can just get down.
Exactly. There's kind of two sides to the spectrum. Those people who would love to eat more in the gaining phase, and those people who are just like hating to eat more, but their body forces them to.
Actually, that leads me to a quick point, I think, was just because I don't know how many people listening are in a similar position to me. I don't feel like a lot of people get to the position I get to with my appetite. But I just thought I'd bring it up in case a number are, because yesterday I was feeling very nauseous. So essentially what ended up happening, if I reverse engineer this, on Monday, I got a little bit behind on my food. And so post-workout, if I just have this moo milk, it's like 700 calories. It's not enough. Like I need to eat at least 1,000 calories at this meal. Otherwise, like if I fall behind 300 calories and that starts moving to other meals, and it essentially moved all the way to my evening dinner, and my evening dinner just got too big for my liking. And that meant eating some things that I hadn't eaten in a while and eating just a lot of quantity. And I just didn't feel good in that moment, which led to my sleep not feeling the greatest. I felt a bit nauseous in the night. And then the next morning I felt nauseous on waking, which is never a nice feeling. And that's like the sensation I get towards when I know I'm in a sticky situation. And so kind of my breakfast was a complete chore to get down. Like I have been since mini cutting, just able to get my breakfast down super easy. Well, super easy, pretty easy most mornings. Like I haven't been like looking forward to it. Like I get to eat. It's been, okay, let's do this. Let's get that down. Whereas this time it was like, all right, looking at it for a while, having half of it, coming back to it, that sort of thing. I got it down, but then even the morning kind of toilet time was less than ideal. And so I just had this kind of nauseous feeling in my stomach. Then got into my session, managed to get through it. It was very productive despite feeling nauseous through it. I managed to beat my last numbers, take everything to 0 RAR. It was a hell of a session. I was just telling you via voice note, my quads are like completely destroyed today, like throughout the entire quad, which is a nice sensation when you know that, well, I'm hoping they're going to recover in time for my next leg session. I think they will, but we'll have to see. And at least that's a hamstring dominant session. But anyway, this morning then, or rather that day, I was very careful to, alongside the moo milk, the chocolate milk, I also had 750 mils of smoothie. So that got me 1,000 calories right there. And then I made sure to just front load my food a little bit more. So I wasn't eating within the last 2 hours before bed. And I felt so much better for it this morning. And I just say that because I think like last time I kind of just ignited my mini cut, it was a case of I just could, it was like a weird stress response to the breakfast and I couldn't get it down. It was just not happening. And I was already struggling to maintain in my deload before that for days where I just had no appetite. And I think this is just a good reminder in general, like don't make split decisions based off of one little occasion essentially. So this morning I was back to almost normal in terms of getting my breakfast down, no nausea, feeling fine. So for anyone who is in that kind of position, it might just be that you had one kind of bad distribution of your nutrition one day and that bled onto the next. Just reorganize it, just like if you have one poor night's sleep, reorganize it in future to get that sleep and you'll fall back into a good routine and habit, hopefully. Because I do not want to be stuck at 190 pounds and have to mini cut again. I want to push through that barrier, and I believe I can if I just prioritize making sure I eat when I can and earlier in the day. So yeah, it was just an experience. But also, I surprise myself sometimes with what I can push through. Like that leg session, I think a lot of people, if they felt the way I felt, they'd be like, "Nah, it's just not happening." And I was just like, I can push through it. I can do it. It's not my quads that are the problem. It's just my stomach. So I just made sure to take my time, not rush the session, and yeah, had a good session.
This is, I think, the moment where people are making very rather impulsive and emotional decisions most of the time, that they may then later regret, or that then ends up with them once again not seeing the progress that they would like to, because they are always gauging their decisions around kind of their current well-being and their current emotional state about a certain situation. And we can clearly also then correlate that, what directly translated over to something like a cutting phase, for example, where people then on one day feel particularly tired, feel like not motivated at all, and what happens, maybe then by the end of the day they are eating more. And when you're then giving into a sensation like this, whenever you don't really feel 100%, then you will probably not see the progress that you would like. Same goes then the other way around as well, either in a training session where then you go into, you're maybe not even going to the gym, but you get up in the morning and you are just like, today I'm not feeling like great. All right, yeah, sure. If it's happening once, totally fine. But if that happens on a frequent basis, so several times per week or several times throughout a mesocycle, it's probably not the best thing. Same goes then for a diet as well. Rather, well, whether it's in a gaining phase or cutting phase doesn't even matter. They are kind of all connected and intertwined, because often people make these decisions based on impulsive decisions and just like their current well-being. And I can relate to that because I did that myself in the past as well. And I don't know what happened. Of course, I think that I could probably point it towards just getting more mature, getting more detached from my emotions and what it is that I want now, just like push it aside because I have more of a long-term goal in mind, whereas other people have it more like that the priority or what they want now weighs a higher priority than the long-term gratification of the entire process or their goals. And I think it's super important to just take a time whenever you feel like this and then not go for it, right? Just say no to yourself. I think it's super important to be able to say no. And I think that many people have a hard time, whether it is now in their private life with other things or with themselves, of saying no to especially instant gratification or saying no to what it is that they feel right now.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And an occasion I see it as well is like if you probably see it with clients too, and maybe even yourself, like you have one kind of off session. And normally if you look to the days prior, whatever, you can see why you had that one off session. But if you aren't thinking about that and you're just in the moment, you're like, oh man, I've had a terrible session, let's just deload then. And if you're doing these sort of like very reactive off these short-term changes and you're not thinking about the situation, you're not only kind of hurting yourself in the fact that you're making an inappropriate action, because quite often you can just, again, amend the things that led to the poor session, or quite often it was just a one-off and these things pass. So you're making an inappropriate change, but also you're not reflecting upon what led to that. So you keep probably making the same mistake. And I think this is like a common thing for intermediates who then never get to that like advanced stage because they never quite learn and then kind of modify and troubleshoot these things correctly, and they just kind of keep hitting this brick wall. And quite often it's because of lifestyle factors that just quite aren't paving the way towards being able to make that kind of continued progress.
And overall, I think too many emotions go into the entire process. I think as soon as you can detach your emotions to bodybuilding, the better you're off most of the time. That doesn't mean that you should be, I don't know, not having any kind of feelings towards it. I think it's absolutely all right to have like a fire burning inside of you, a passion for it or anything alike. But it's more than for the overarching journey instead of for the initial short term. Yeah. And I think that emotions have no place in your decision making when it comes to these things. It should be more so as a rational thing of like, okay, what is it that I need to do in order to get to X? And no matter what then happens, it's just something that I'm doing, independent of what I feel on one specific occasion or so. And then you will have shitty days when it comes to your training sessions. You will have less optimal environments, but also on the flip side, you will have great environment as well. Sometimes great days, great pumps, days where you aren't feeling hunger at all, and then days where you will be overly hungry. Right. So with that being said, Steve, let's take a short break here and then come back with a question that basically ties into what it is that we have been talking about.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
So back again at it. So we've asked for some questions over on YouTube, or basically here in the last Improvement Season podcast, whether we should bring some of the questions or Q&As back. And one question from Emilio Lopez, he asked, question for the next podcast. Why does my mass gaining phase still feel like a bit of a cut, as I sometimes finish meals and am still hungry, having to eat a lot of vegetables? Should I listen to my body telling me to eat more, or listen to my fitness pal saying don't eat anyway?
So And I realized we actually ended up not giving people much time to ask questions, did we? Because we record this on Wednesday and it gets released on a Monday.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
We can always, if there's more that come, we can always just like keep tabs on it.
Yeah.
And we can cover some off now and then. But yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a good one. It's one I've definitely visited before personally and with clients and have been asked it. So I would say listening to your body. Actually, it's a really, because there's actually a lot of ways you can go about this. So first of all, my general stance on this is listening to your body isn't often a great sign because hunger is multifaceted. It isn't just directed by energy balance. So I think where people come from with this, they're like, if I'm in a surplus, then I shouldn't be hungry because like I'm satisfying all my energy needs. And so my body should be saying thumbs up, you're full, or like slightly over full. But hunger is, like I said, multifaceted. And if you are in a certain environment, like we often are, where there's hyperpalatable foods, food is available all the time, the body is very good on kind of wanting to eat more. And you kind of pass these true hunger and you just want to eat, donuts. Like you ask, 9 out of 10 people, if you ask them if they want to eat a donut right now, just because they could have a donut or whatever pleasurable food, cheesecake, something like this, with some fats and carbs, they're going to want to eat it. If there was no consequences or anything for like the health-minded people, they would just say, yeah, I have an appetite for that. So, but do you need that? No, you don't. Like you probably don't need to eat the extra 1,000 calories this big slice of cheesecake is going to give you. So it's a tricky one to get into if you just start listening to your hunger cues all the time. A great example of this could be Pascal as an example, because your actual surplus needs isn't a huge amount of calories. And if you started eating what I'm eating, for example, you'd probably just overeat if you weren't kind of controlling your calories and keeping an eye on that. And so you'd think, oh, my body's telling me I need to eat more, so I clearly need to eat more. And even if he's keeping towards his kind of vegetables and things like this, I imagine you also, Pascal, feel like at times you could eat more and you have an appetite to eat more, even of the same amount of foods that you're eating if you were going day by day, which is, again, there's an individual aspect towards hunger too. And if I was to listen to hunger as another example, I'd be under eating every single day. I'd probably be in a deficit, to be quite frank. So it's really a tricky cue to listen to. And then in terms of MyFitnessPal saying don't eat more, I wouldn't necessarily go by why. I think what that means is you have a certain number of macros or calories that's going to lead to a theoretical surplus that's going to lead to a certain average rate of gain over time. And that's what MyFitnessPal is saying. And I think that's what you should, that's your more objective data is what's the scale doing? Is it moving up appropriately over time? If it is, then you don't need to be eating more. You're gaining at the appropriate pace. The only additional addendum I guess I have to that is if you're trying to stay excessively leaner than you would be at your best. So if you have any elements of diet fatigue in addition to hunger, like your libido's down, your energy level's down, your kind of motivation to train is down, you can't train, your performance is down, you should probably listen to hunger because you're probably just too lean at the moment. You probably actually need to gain a bit of body fat and almost recover that potentially. That could be one kind of additional thought that I have about that. But assuming everything else is in a good place, you have no other diet fatigue factors, go by the scale, not by what your body's telling you in terms of like your hunger and appetite.
No, absolutely. That was very well put. I have a couple of more additions to it. Because of course, when it comes to questions like these, we are lacking a certain amount of context behind it. So that's why there will be certain things that are up for debate and also up for our own interpretation. So for example, when it comes to your overall situation, you say that you have been in a massing phase, but the first question is like, for how long have you been in a massing phase for? Because if you just gotten into a massing phase and 4 weeks ago you've been in a cutting phase and that cutting phase was long, you got you into very lean territories, then probably it hasn't been enough time and you will still feel those negative adaptations of a deficit. Secondarily, another question, and that is something that I've seen and heard often already, is like when someone is saying like, I eat a lot of vegetables. And I don't want to get too close to you specifically, Emilio, because I have no idea how many vegetables it is that you're truly eating. But whenever I see or hear people saying, I eat a lot of vegetables, their definition of what a lot of vegetables is not my definition of what a lot of vegetables is. Unless you have massive digestive issues and massive bloating associated with a vegetable intake that you have, I don't really think that you eat a lot of vegetables at the moment. And only because you may then eat a lot of vegetables in one meal doesn't make it a lot of vegetables throughout the day. And then another thing that we can bring up is kind of the entire meal composition throughout the day. Because often the people who are then ending up in a gaining phase and are still quite hungry, even deep into a gaining phase, are the ones there of whom's meal composition and entire diet could be quite optimized overall. That the meals that they are eating are still way too palatable, way too processed, don't have a great emphasis on wholesome foods, in quotation marks, healthy foods and all that kind of stuff. Because if someone were to tell me like, hey man, I'm constantly hungry, then I have to question that. Because the thing is, if you're eating something like, I don't know, for lunch, having a decent amount of potatoes, for example, lean protein source such as chicken and some vegetables, along with a sauce, there's nothing wrong in having something like this in a gaining phase, especially when you are still hungry. Have something like this for lunch. Then for dinner, maybe something similar as well, right? It could be then another starchy carbohydrate source alongside with a lean protein source and some vegetables. This in between, you have like a snack of fruits or vegetables alongside with something like skyr or yogurt. And then in the morning time, you have something very similar to what it is that you have as a snack. I very start to question like what it is that you're doing in terms of your hunger. Because if you are still ravenously hungry with something like this, it's most of the time because the cutting phase has just been finished or you're way too lean. And very rarely is someone way too lean. Very rarely. So what's your take on everything that I said there, Steve?
I think the addition of how long have you been massing was a really important addition that I hadn't said, but I absolutely agree with. Because, yeah, if you've just finished an extended, like, I don't know, you've lost 10% of your body weight and now you're going into a gaining phase. I mean, 10% of your body weight is no small feat. You're probably not going to be feeling 100% very soon. So, but you don't necessarily need to go into a larger surplus to expedite that. It's just some of these things, there's a time component to it, and it might just be after like another 4 weeks, now you don't feel this hunger all the time. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And then also just dialing into like, some people have funny perceptions surrounding food and how, like, as an example, I posted my bowl of cereal that I was eating for breakfast in the morning, and someone asked me, post-workout, right? Because I think some people assume you can only eat that post-workout or you have to eat that post-workout, or I don't know, people have funny conceptions and ideas surrounding food. And it's like, well, if you're hungry all the time and a lot of your foods are very palatable and you don't want to be hungry, have less palatable foods, have more diet like friendly foods. So, but ultimately, I think we agree on the fact that hunger is just generally a terrible, a terrible use of your kind of to guide your nutritional intake.
Absolutely. And the thing is, a good example was when we were in Vienna, for example. It's not, Steve has issues with hitting his caloric target, especially when, such as you said so yourself, Steve, it's later in the day and calories are just like adding up and you need to actually then get all of those calories in later in the day. That doesn't mean, though, that you won't be hungry at certain points. Right? It's not that you could now, because you are in such a well-fed position, go on a 72-hour fast or so and be absolutely fine without any kind of hunger signaling or anything alike. Hunger will still take place. It may not be as severe as in a deep cutting phase or so, but hunger will still come, like especially due to other factors as well, such as ghrelin spikes, etc., etc. Also, what needs to be said is, let's just assume, and this is really just making an assumption, Emilio, you could also be very much in that position where you overfed in terms of the size of your meals. Because that is for sure something that I've had in the past, and I've seen other people as well, where you've been so afraid of experiencing hunger that you always stuffed your face, and you've also abused something like vegetables, for example, where it's like you very much stuffed yourself and by that possibly even stretched your stomach, completely annihilated the sensation of hunger. And now, for the first time in a long time, you're experiencing what hunger once again feels like. And it's so foreign to you that you can't reinterpret it. And while it's a normal sensation that you're now going through, because it's so foreign to you, it feels like, oh shit, what is going on now? It feels like a shock to you, even though that it's just mild hunger. But you have unlearned how to interpret that hunger signaling as well. That could be another thing, right? Just something to think about, because you can certainly also overdo it in terms of then vegetable intake. A general rule of thumb, though, is if you are experiencing that, what it is that you do right now, clean up your diet most of the time. And most of the time, it works itself out often. Hardly ever have I found someone who still experiences a lot of hunger when he keeps things relatively, in quotation marks, clean throughout his day. And then you can't even gain, because it's like you said, Steve, some people have the perception that they don't need to eat a lot of vegetables or greens or something like salads anymore in a gaining phase. That salads are kind of forbidden. It's kind of the forbidden fruit in a gaining phase. When in reality, I still love salads every now and then. It's not that I need that right now. It's just because I freaking like it. It tastes great, right? And then as a side dish or so, perfect. Hey, let's have it, right? This sometimes even allows you to then have something that is a little bit higher in calories as well, because you're kind of modifying that. This is, in my opinion, way more the spirit of if it fits your macros instead of something else, of like if it fits your macros to then make palatable things being thrown into your diet. It's more like, all right, how can I modify things to have a clean meal and still enjoy it, but not have or abuse the term of if it fits your macros? And I think that too many people think, all right, I'm in a gaining phase, so I need to reduce my vegetable intake. I can't have any kind of salads anymore. Instead of having potatoes as carb sources, I need to go now with cereals. And that often leads to then the sensation of being overly hungry in a gaining phase.
Yeah, it's we talked about that. What's it called? It's kind of the climbing up the palatability, the hedonic staircase, as Mike Israel would call it. Like, as you diet, you don't immediately go to all these like hyper satiating foods and high volume foods. You kind of slowly reduce some of the like junkier foods, that are like junkier in quotation marks, and palatable foods in your diet, the less kind of voluminous and satiety inducing foods, and you go towards more. And slowly over time, just like you come out of it, you should slowly introduce these back in. And I think some people have that switch where they're like, nope, suddenly I'm in a gaining phase, now I must eat this way. And I'd also just finally say, and I think this is kind of what you're alluding to, hunger is not a problem. Hunger is actually kind of a good thing, because if you're hungry then and you're gaining at an appropriate pace, that's great, so long as it's not like excessive hunger. But a little bit of hunger, for me at least, it's a relief to feel hunger, and I enjoy feeling hungry. Whereas I was in a position before, though, like you, Pascal, and where you described where you'd been there, where hunger was like almost like you were scared almost to feel hunger, and it was like a really uncomfortable thing. But once you realize like nothing goes wrong if you're hungry, especially if you're in a surplus. It's not like you're going to feel like really, you shouldn't have these sensations of really low energy levels and all the kind of other things that can be associated with hunger. But just having an appetite, it's actually kind of a good thing in a gaining phase.
Oh, I love that one, the last one. I think that there's a clear distinction between true hunger and having an appetite. Because often, and this is something that I've communicated over on Instagram several times already, I don't think that the vast majority of people listening to this podcast, me, myself included, of course, know what true, actual hunger feels like. Often, everything that we're doing is voluntarily being put on us because we are doing it ourselves. Right? We decide to actually be in a cutting phase. And often, though, for us, it's still a luxurious thing because we know that all we have to do is kind of survive the next 4 to maybe 6 hours or so. And then the next meal will be there. We know this. This is not what true actual hunger looks like. This is kind of having bouts of appetite. It's like, all right, the body gives us now the signal. Now it's time to eat again. But true actual hunger is something that I also don't wish any one of us to experience. It's like we can't even decide to have something to eat now. And I really don't hope that any one of us listening now to this podcast or any one of us here has to go through it, because I think that then this podcast isn't around anymore. And then we are in, then there are other problems that we have to deal with.
So when I haven't said it for a long time, but I definitely used to say things like, I'm starving. And it's like, you're not starving. Like, look at you. Like, you're not starving. It's just not something we, hopefully, like you said, will ever experience. So should we get to his second question? I do also have
absolutely.
it written down.
But once again, Emilio, everything that we've talked about, it's not making us an assumption that this is you. It's just we are going through different scenarios that could be the case for you, maybe to a smaller extent, maybe to a higher extent, and maybe you have found yourself in some things that we've talked through. I just want to make it very clear so that it's not like, oh man, they're just giving me shit for something that we don't even know about, you know? So with that then being said, I think one that is very similar to that one is from Elijah Richards. What is the unhealthy, in quotation marks, food each of you incorporate into your mass gaining phase when you have no appetite? For example, when I have zero appetite, I typically make mac and cheese with chicken to get my calories, protein in. Great podcast as always, guys. Thank you very much, Elijah. So for me, I just take it from here very quickly, Steve, because it's actually pretty straightforward. It's something that I would have never allowed myself in the past. It's actually quite crazy, but it just shows how much I matured when it comes to nutrition and eating like a proper adult, something that I always preach. And I am super proud of that myself, because we have, shout out to Alexander Katara, because I helped him out with setting up kind of lighting for his Instagram reels. And as a thank you, he sent me kind of a package with light that was over, and also some kind of goodies. Most of the goodies I was just like, no, I'm not going to eat that. But he sent a couple of bars of Lindt chocolate, which is very, very tasty chocolate. And thing is that whenever, even now, I'm at the end of the day and I have like something like 50 or 100 calories left, I'm just like, had everything now. I'm not really hungry, and that is kind of really with the last dinner. So let's just have like one corner of that chocolate. And I'm having one piece of that chocolate, for example. And this is just one example of many that I could then incorporate. Having one piece of chocolate and being totally fine with that, because it just is there to fill up the last little bit of macros to get me into the macro range for the day.
I'm a terrible person to ask this question to.
For you, it's just the entire day.
Because I'm just like, there isn't one. Like, there isn't something that
everything
I go
that
to.
you're eating at the moment. So, Elijah, just on a tangent here. When we were in Vienna, I was there with Mike and Steve, obviously. We were together in an Airbnb apartment, and I, with my poverty macros, was always like eating the typical things. I was even doing myself or making myself some potatoes at one point. And Steve and Mike, man, you should have seen their nutrition. It was crazy. Like Mike, he was actually having like a bowl of cereals. Like, I think, let me guess, it was kind of 200 grams, nearly half of the bag of cereals in one sitting, and that wasn't it. He needed then to actually also prepare some bread with Nutella on it just to even fill out the macros. So I think at some point it's like everything becomes unhealthy for them.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a tricky one, because also it's so interesting to me, because I was also reflecting upon the way you were eating over the weekend, because you're with each other, and what you described here is that's being a diet. So like at the end of the day, I will incorporate maybe a little bit of chocolate, or have like some dark chocolate on my oats, and that's my little bit of something. And very rarely do I do more than that. So yeah, like you said, for my kind of, I think most people would look at most of my meals. I still get in some vegetables. I still have some fruit. Some of it's through smoothies. There's nothing I go to that I'm like, man, I'm really struggling for food today. I'm going to eat this, because everything is kind of like, there's nothing like I'm really like, that sounds amazing, that's what I'm going to eat today. So yeah, I'm a terrible person to ask.
No, absolutely. I mean, thing is, just to elaborate a little bit more on this. I still have some boxes of cereals from, I don't even know who sent it to me. At some point, these are American cereals. I think that they are already a year old, simply because I haven't been in a position where I felt the need of eating something like this, to be honest. And I think that the entire episode has been kind of already touching on it, about kind of making more rational decisions around nutrition, not just going by the emotions and what you feel that you want and need right now, kind of being impulsive. Because, I mean, the cereals are great and taste amazing, but do you really need that? And leave you maybe feeling hungry and leaving you in a more vulnerable position? I hate it, but it's like you said, suffering because you feel like you're starving or so? Probably not. And I save this for the next time when I'm then really kind of in a position where I don't really feel like eating anything anymore, and then I chuck it in. Instead of now having it just because I have it here, doesn't mean that I need to have it, you know?
No. Again, that's you going by the objective data of scale weights going up. Like, why would you just chuck in more calories because you're like, oh, Steve's having big bowls of cereal, I should be having big bowls of cereal. It's like, well, my macros, my numbers are mine. They have no real reflection on what you should be doing, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's a good distinction. And yeah, should we get to the last question? Do we have time for one more? I think we do.
Yeah. Let's also, that is from Emilio. If I'm gaining at 2.5 kilograms a week, and 1 week I gain, say, 1 kilogram, should I go to maintenance or maybe cut the next week until I get back on track, or just lower calories to gain at the desired rate, but not adjusting for the extra gain? Thanks.
So this is great because we basically have already answered this with our kind of chat surrounding don't make kind of reactive decisions based off short-term data collection. And so especially in the, like you, I imagine you see this all the time with yourself and with clients. And once you've been gathering this kind of weekly average data and the trends over time, you see it in your own kind of scale weight reading. So you don't even need the hundreds of clients we work with to be able to know this. But people often have spurts of weight gain. I have some clients where literally it'll be like 1 week they like may lose weight, and then the next week they gain like a kilo, and then they lose weight and then but in the long run, when I average things out, it's like, okay, now they're actually in the rate of gain I want them to be. So that's something I was really bad for when I was in my like adipose phobic phase. I'd be very reactive. If I was a smidge above my target rate of gain, I'd be like, pull back calories. And then the next week I'd lose weight and I'd be like, oh shit, need to increase calories. And then in the long run, I was basically just pulling up, putting down. I was at maintenance for that extended period of time. So it's very rare. It's like, why would you suddenly gain a kilo if you've eaten the same amount of calories as previous weeks where you'd been gaining at an appropriate pace? Your activity levels haven't, it's not like you've just decided, I'm not going to do my cardio this week, or I'm suddenly just super sedentary. Like you haven't how's energy balance going to suddenly shift to mean you're in a huge surplus? There's something else going on, and probably I imagine the next week it may plateau completely, so you're not gaining anything, and then you'll be back where kind of in that target rate of gain, I imagine. So I would say stick it out, see where it goes, especially if what I've said is true for you, Emilio, in terms of like activity levels that haven't changed, calorie intake hasn't changed. Just stick it through.
Absolutely. And because we're having a little bit of time, we can actually elaborate on this one, because we just had Eric Trexler on the podcast, and he is also then, I don't know what position he's in when it comes to Macro Factor app. But something like this, I've heard very good things about the app, but also I think at the current time being, because he said like sometimes it's making better decisions than a coach, I'm still a little bit skeptical about it. While yes, AIs probably can often make better decisions just based on data itself, we also need to acknowledge that, especially when it comes to rate gain, rate of loss, and all that kind of stuff, other things come into play as well that the AI yet doesn't really pick up on. And for me personally, and I don't know how it is for you, Steve, when I set my athletes on a caloric deficit or onto a gaining phase, hardly ever do I need to make frequent adjustments to that to their macros. Sometimes I have those rare occasions where, especially when we're starting out, that our initial estimate was completely off. I can just like bring up one example of one of my athletes. We started off at around 3,200 calories. Now he's consuming 4,500 calories. And that is both in a gaining phase. You know, where I was like, all right, we just ramp up the macros because we are not seeing the trend that we would like to. And sometimes you also have those individuals where then the fluctuation is super, super large on a weekly basis, where then sometimes they have like 2 or 3 weeks where they are losing weight, and then you bump up the calories just by 100 or 200 calories, and then all of a sudden they are gaining at a pace of around 0.6% of a body weight gain per week. And then you think like, holy shit, is it now too fast after all? And then over time, you get a better idea of what really works for that individual. So collecting data over a longer period of time is important, but also, and now I try to put it into more simplistic terms, because I think that people often get caught up in data and being too nitpicky when it comes to certain things. Ask yourself this question. And once again, this is simplifying things. What is it that your goal is? In your case, Emilio, it is to gain weight. So what is it that we want to ensure? It's to be in a caloric surplus. Whether you are now gaining at a slower pace or faster pace, in the end, doesn't really matter. We need to at least exceed the threshold of a caloric intake to gain weight. That is the main thing, the main reason for us, or the main focus point for us. We want to be in a caloric surplus. And we want to have that being reflected in our scale weight over a longer period of time. Same goes though for the other way around. When we are in a counting phase, we want to exceed the threshold to the downside so that we are seeing the scale weight is trending down over a longer period of time. In the end, it doesn't then matter whether you are consuming, like, let's say, in a gaining phase, 3,000 calories or 3,100 calories. Now, scientific literature aside, what the optimal rate of weight gain is. If you're not gaining weight, you're not gaining weight. Then you're not in a caloric surplus, and this is probably also not what we want. If you're gaining a little bit too fast, yeah, maybe you may accumulate a little bit more fat tissue, but we can at least ensure that we have exceeded that threshold and we are doing what it is that we intended to do with this phase, and that is to gain. As long as you're not going completely overboard with it, I rather want you to be in that more aggressive surplus rather than just like hovering around maintenance.
Yeah.
What's your take on everything that I said, Steve?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so nice to just like frame it like that and be like, what's the goal right now? The goal is, because again, the kind of mindset Emilio may be coming from with this question is one of that kind of slightly scared to gain weight, scared to gain fat, worried about that. And I so hated this mindset for myself because it held me back so much. So when you frame it like the way you did there, Pascal, which is so helpful, is like, what is actually the goal right now? Like I used to find pleasure in seeing the scale weight come down or maintain when I was in mass gaining phase. How illogical is that? The goal is to gain weight. The goal is to be in a surplus, and you're happy when you're maintaining or losing weight in like when you're meant to be in a surplus. That's against the goal. So it makes absolutely no sense. So if it's going up a bit fast, sure, that might feel a bit wrong, but at least you're achieving the goal, and that's better than the other way around. So it's just reframing it about kind of keeping the goal. And then also when you logically think about it, what's more likely to happen in a gaining phase? Just like in a cut phase, more likely you're going to have to reduce calories than increase them, because as you adapt downwards and you're a smaller individual, probably to reinstate the calorie deficit that you want, you probably have to reduce them. What are the chances that you're going to have to reduce calories in a gaining phase? If it was an appropriate surplus before, if anything, you're adapting up to it. So you would have to increase the surplus. So reducing a surplus in a gaining phase, again, unless there's some activity that's suddenly been removed from your life, or you've suddenly become really inaccurate with some of your kind of calorie calculations or what have you, or like your what you're putting into MyFitnessPal or however you're tracking your nutrition, like the chances are you're not going to have to reduce the food you're going to have to take in, and probably have to increase.
Yeah, and it's the same way around for a cutting phase, for example. Many people think, and you've probably experienced that yourself in the past with athletes asking you like, aren't we going too fast right now?
Yes.
Are we running risk of maybe losing muscle mass or so? And then the question is like, so first and foremost, do you feel good still? Yeah, hunger is not an issue. You're not feeling overly lethargic and all that kind of stuff. You're still getting plenty of food in. So what's the concern here? right? And if then even the caloric deficit itself fluctuates by 100 or 200 calories on a daily basis, as long as you're exceeding that threshold and you are in a caloric deficit, then I don't really care whether you are now in a more aggressive one on one day and a less aggressive one on the other day. The main thing is that we are getting the job done. Of course, in everything that we've talked about in a more reasonable manner. It should never be like, I don't know, in a massing phase, you're just eating whatever you want now. That's not what we're talking about. And we've never been like that. We are always kind of more vanilla, more middle ground of like, take a reasonable approach to everything. But also there, right? You don't necessarily have to be absolutely dogmatic in tracking each and every single rice corn or so. Same goes then the other way around. In the gaining phase, we just want to make sure that you are in a caloric surplus. You will probably have days where you are gaining a little bit faster, some days where it won't really be that fast, but also in a cutting phase, what's the likelihood that you're losing way too fast? For the vast majority of people, it's not that they should be concerned about. Most of the time, it's that they are losing not fast enough. And the other way around is as well, kind of, what's the likelihood that you are gaining or that you're eating way too much? Hardly ever the case, unless, of course, there are cases out there, you're super small female or so, your maintenance intake is at 1400. Of course, if you're now going out and eating 2400 calories, it's maybe too much on an aggressive surplus, but you get the idea. If you set a reasonable target for your rate of gain, and let's just say you are aiming to have 300 calories of a caloric surplus in a gaining phase, and by an error of measurement, you're now ending up at 500 calories, you're totally good. If you're, though, due to error of measurement, ending up with only 100 calories, and you see that the scale weight isn't going up, I think it's more of a problem, because it then once again falls back to, are we accomplishing what we set for ourselves? And probably not so much. Whereas the other way with those 500 calories, probably more so.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only additional thing I'd say to you is, again, that's coming from a background of making an educated and smart kind of initial deficit or surplus. And then if you do need to make a change based off kind of longer term trends, it generally only needs to be a small change that you need to make. Because like you said, we were meeting the threshold. We haven't suddenly jumped away from the threshold. We're probably very close to it now. We just need to meet it again. So it can just be a small adjustment, especially when you're in a surplus. You do, like you said, sometimes you can just add 100 and you're like, oh, that made a huge difference in these couple of weeks. That's strange. But in the long term, when I map out ranges, and I'm sure you do something similar for your clients, is you kind of have ranges of body weight we want to land within. As long as we're kind of in those ranges most weeks, quite often it will jump up and down, but by the end of that mesocycle, like we're bang within this range of where we wanted to be. And it's like, cool. We probably didn't actually make any adjustments. So yeah, I think that hopefully answered the question well.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think it's a perfect place to end this. Thank you very much for the questions, guys. And once again, just keep in comment. If we don't really get to your questions, we just collect them and try to make sure to then bring them up at some later point or so. And yeah, if you then have, of course, things where you're saying like, all right, the things that you guys talked about sounds good and well, but I can't really put it into practice myself, you can always reach out to us. And we will then get on a call, discuss your problems, discuss the things that you are struggling with at the moment, and then take it from there. Just have to go over to revivestronger.com/online coaching, and then we're setting things up. But as always, guys, sorry once again also for my voice and for the lack of concentration maybe. I hope that it wasn't as noticeable. Next week, hopefully things are back to normal again. As always, thank you very much for listening. Leave a rating over on Spotify, thumbs up, and all the kind of good stuff to help us out with everything. And I guess I speak to you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The minicup movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The minicut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.